It's actually a secular nation.
Hello and welcome to the Secular Nation Podcast 1 year anniversary extravaganza!
Happy anniversary, Tim.
I am your host, Tim Brandon. With me is my associate, Michael X.
Hello.
Well, we just got back from the Atheist Alliance of America convention in Boston.
Good old Boston. I'm having withdrawal symptoms.
Me too. As you can see right now, I'm sort of coming back from a cold. But we had a great time. We got to meet a lot of people. I personally got to be chauffeur to none other than Aaron Ra, which was a great honor for me, again, just to be his toady. Although he left one of his jerky wrappers in my car.
Oh.
Barbarian. Anyway, there was a great number of speakers. Michael here was doing the sound for that, so he probably knows more about it than I did because I was stuck doing the table.
Yeah, poor Tim was kind of in the lobby while I was, poor me, running around setting up microphones and making sure laptops went through the projector, so got to be the tech geek and see all the talks, which is a nice thing.
One of the speeches I got to see, or at least parts of, was Paula Apsel, the producer for Nova, and she showed her parts of the episode they did on the Dover trial, which is one of my favorite episodes.
Maybe one of the best documentaries I've ever seen, especially about the topic of evolution.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I know she showed clips of a bunch of them, also Nova Science Now, which I guess they're trying to get funding for, which is a sad state of affairs. But yeah, that she was a good speaker and somebody who's done more than a lot of people just for the advancement of science, in our culture. It's really great stuff.
Oh yeah, I mean, because when you look at the state of science television, like outside public television, it's a travesty. I mean, like the History Channel, like every time I watch it, I just want to die a little inside.
It's not even about history anymore.
I know. Well, see, and even when it is about history, even when they're not talking about conspiracies or ancient aliens and stuff like that, like there's one show I remember seeing. It was called, it was about bunkers, trenches in World War I. Which is actually, that's a subject I'm interested in. I like, World War I think is an underrepresented. You know what they call that show?
No.
Hitler's Bunkers.
Hitler?
It was Hitler's Trenches.
Oh, because he fought at them.
Yeah, well, he fought at one of them.
Right.
But, every time the host of the show keeps trying to, call it back to talking about Hitler, and it's like, here we are at the Battle of Verdun. Now, Hitler wasn't here, but, he would have really been angry about the French or something. This is the spot where historically the French and Germans on Christmas Day went together to play soccer ball. Hitler wouldn't have liked that.
They have lots of cutaways to him and his handlebar mustache from the era.
He had a handlebar mustache?
He did. There's some pictures of him, yeah.
I never do. I knew he briefly had a Fu Manchu mustache, as evidenced by that episode of Captain Planet and the Planeteers when the villains went back in time to help Hitler.
Ah.
That's a real thing. It happened. All right.
Oh, hey, maybe they should put it on the History Channel.
Yeah, I put that a little higher than the History Channel, But that's the thing. Hitler's hate was so powerful that it actually weakened Captain Planet.
There you go.
Look it up, people.
There was also a very, very thought-provoking talk by Dr. Andy Thompson, who's on the Richard Dawkins Foundation, and he was talking about the placebo effect, and he urged us to kind of rethink placebo effect as being a fake effect. That this is actually, if you take a more systems approach to looking at health, and the placebo effect is essentially real and can be part of a therapeutic process. So I'm hoping that we can get him on the podcast at some point, because he was really great.
Rebecca Vitzman, she's the famous by her interview with Wolf Blitzer after the Oklahoma tornado, who actually, stood up and said, actually, I'm an atheist. She is such a sweetheart. I mean, I actually got to hang out with her a lot. She's really cool. And Anders, her son there, was there.
Also very cool.
Every bit as much a handful in real life as he is in that video.
And by the way, I should say that our introduction is going to include her saying it's actually a secular nation. But yeah, she was terrific. And what was also great to me was her talk focused on. She told the harrowing story about how she, narrowly escaped the tornado, but also how she is turning that personal tragedy into something for the good of she started an organization for people to participate in disasters and be part of kind of an atheist or a humanist team to be present, and then that kind of helps with the whole Joe Klein problem that we're there helping, but we just don't have the same color T-shirt.
Yeah, we kind of just amalgamate into whatever group we're helping with. Because that's sort of what she was saying is like a lot of humanists or whatnot. They go to help. They go to these places to help out, and usually the people organizing it are the churches. So they kind of like, well, fine, I'll just help with the church people.
Yeah. Yeah, and so there's some. I mean, I think that's something worth looking into, and something as Atheist Alliance organizations we should look into and network together. Another person that we're hoping to interview sometime this week or next week is LaDonna York, who is from the Atheists Helping the Homeless organization, and she told about her history with homelessness and with the homeless community, and given that we're from Atlantic City, where homelessness is a real problem, I'd like to talk with her, and hopefully we can discuss how to start a local organization of atheists helping the homeless.
Okay, one of the other major events in the conference was the presentation of the Richard Dawkins Award to Steven Pinker. Well, he had a very interesting speech. He sort of went on this idea of the decrease in violence in our society over the centuries. As we kind of think of this last century as being the most bloody, but really it's sort of compared to in previous centuries, it's a very steady downward turn.
Yeah, that it's easy to focus on the genocidal aspects of the 20th century, but then when you think about day-to-day violence and even violence in war, it's very counterintuitive to think that there's been a decline. In his book, massive tome that it is, the Better Angels of Our Nature, I've seen him give the talk twice, and it's hard. It seems difficult to refute. I'd like to read the book and really get a sense of it.
Yeah.
I know. In my own field, I mean, Dr. Pinker, when I was a cognitive psychologist, there were some people who vehemently disagreed with some of his theories on language, but at least his theories were well written, well discussed, well described, and worthy of attention. And I think in this case, I think this premise is worthy of attention.
Mm-hmm. Also, I think one of the great speakers was Maryam Namazie, who's
yeah, Maryam Namazie is such a firebrand on the dais, and such a gentle, kind person in person. And she was talking about combating the Islamic right and their subjugation of women. And one of the things we talked with her about, we did talk with her, and she'll be coming right up. We discussed, some of the more provocative things she said for a Western audience had to do with the left and kind of facilitating Islamic treatment of women by kind of being culturally, open-minded about, well, that's what Muslims are. They like the burqa, and we shouldn't judge them. And she is very, though she herself is a leftist, is very opposed to that kind of thinking. Richard Dawkins has gotten himself in trouble with about recently. So.
Oh my! Well, that's coming right up is our interview with Maryam Namazie. Maryam, pleasure to be talking with you. You just finished your big speech in the big room. So.
But and which I have to say, having seen you now at the Women in Secularism Conference and now seeing you here as kind of an American liberal, your talks have really challenged me to combat multiculturalism, which you've seen. Well, maybe it's good for you to describe the kind of perils of multiculturalism and the American left, and what we can do to fight what you're fighting.
Well, thanks for having me. I mean, I think multiculturalism has really wonderful connotations. And in a sense, if you're looking at multiculturalism as a concept where we have all these different types of people and foods and groups living together, it's a wonderful thing as a really positive lived experience. But my problem with multiculturalism is more as a social or political policy where it segregates groups and designates them into one imagined homogeneous community, like the so-called Muslim community, where then the state, in a sense, shrugs its responsibilities towards those citizens and hands them over to Islamic organizations or these regressive imams and, parasitical reactionary and misogynist groups that feign to represent the so-called community. And I guess the reality of the matter is that no community is homogeneous. There are so many differences of opinion in each community, and it's dangerous to see a community as homogeneous, because you end up giving that community over to those in power. And of course, with the rise of Islamism and political Islam, what happens is that you're handing over people, many of them dissenting, to the political Islamic movement.
I mean, my sort of experience with the way that politics are so polarized in this country, a lot of times when you talk about Islam, it is sort of that dichotomy between the sort of blatantly racist, quote-unquote Islamophobics, and then the sort of all-inclusive, multiculturalist, basically which can be the worst kinds of cultural relativism. And
well, I mean, if I can follow up on that one, I remember, the American left being supportive of freedom in Iran early against Ayatollah Khomeini and the like, but now that Fox News has taken the mantle ever since September 11th, that they've backed off. Do you feel that's an accurate depiction of what U.S. left has done?
I mean, I think the problem with the mainstream U.S. left, and I'm on the left myself. So obviously not every left group is like this, but in general, is that they only look within the prisms of anti-imperialism, and in a sense are quick to defend anything that the U.S. government is against. So they'll support Ahmadinejad, and they'll support, Assad in Syria right now, for example. And the point of the matter is that you don't have to, just even if you're against U.S.-led militarism, which I think is a good thing to be against it, you can also be against Assad and the Iranian regime and defend people. It's the same way that someone can... I think it's not very difficult to understand, because in the same way that the U.S. government doesn't necessarily represent each and every one of you, the Iranian regime doesn't represent each and every one of us. In fact, it's a dictatorship, and people are fighting against it all the time. And not everyone who's fighting against it is a puppet of the U.S. government. Oppression leads to resistance, and whether it's the type, the more subtle sort of forces you see in the United States or in Iran. Obviously, there's still a huge difference between the two. So
there are those who believe that the president is the Antichrist, or that are actually attempts at, promoting, diversity and freedom in this country for all religions, not just Christianity, are evil and need to be rebelled against.
Well, I mean, it reminds me of the example of, where people tell us, if you're against the Iranian regime, you're sort of feeding into U.S. militarism. Well, I tell all those people who are anti all the, opposition to restrictions and civil liberties in the U.S., well, you shouldn't do that, because there's a war on terror, and you have to be careful because you might spark another terrorist attack. It's not that simple. And that, I think it becomes very simple if you side with people as opposed to regimes and governments, and see, in the same way that you can see that you're different from the U.S. government, can you not see that the Iranian people or the Syrian people are also different, that they may not necessarily want Islamism or dictatorship? in the same way that you might not want the Christian right or restrictions on your civil liberties. It's the same sort of concept. But I don't know why when it comes to the Middle East and North Africa, and particularly when it comes to Islam or Islamism, suddenly these sort of understandings seem to diminish.
Right. Well, it seems to me that when oversimplification happens, that's a sign of ignorance, and to be unaware, then you oversimplify. You imagine that Islamism is equivalent to the entire Muslim population worldwide, and that maybe what Americans should do in general is just become more aware. That's the first step, like you're saying, be familiar with, think of everyone as individuals and what helps the individual better than just the Assad or whoever.
And in addition to awareness, I think we need to reach out in the same way that we're at a conference here in the U.S. where people are reaching out to each other because they're all atheists. Look beyond just your own borders in a sense, because there are atheists and free thinkers and secularists across the world, many of them fighting in very dangerous situations. And it is important to also see them as your natural allies. And many of them are Muslims as well as not. They could be ex-Muslims, they're Muslims. And so in that sense, I think we need to widen our outlook on those who we see as part of our
should be,
so-called
more of the attitude and action of, us Americans in this country who are, we want to fight for religious freedoms in our own country, but also abroad.
I mean, I think, the thing is that it's all very linked in a sense, because if you look, you'll see that religious groups often work across borders and support each other because their aim is the same. If you have the rise of Islamism in the Middle East, it affects the rise of the Christian right in the West. We live in a very small global village, really. And I think the religious are very good at understanding these links. I think we are not as good as doing that and reaching out to the secularists. I know part of the problem is that the religious have all the resources. Obviously, many of them have state power or access to political power that secularists don't necessarily have. But with social media and citizenship journalism, the world is getting much smaller, and I think we need to start reaching out and finding our allies, not just within national borders, but internationally as well. Mm-hmm. I think it will strengthen both of our movements in the sense that it will help give support and solidarity to people living and fighting in very dangerous situations, but it will also bring allies for the fight here against the Christian right. So I think it's just something very natural that anyone who is trying to bring about change will do. But for some reason, we're stuck in a way that I think can be very detrimental, particularly given the fact that the world is changing and we are living in a time of revolutions and uprisings and the possibilities of wonderfully great change. So what we do will really have an impact on what happens in the near future.
Well, I have to thank you. Your talks have been very inspiring, very eye-opening for me personally, and you're such a gracious person and so approachable and so fiery on the dais. It's really great to meet you and have a chance to talk with you.
And thanks for having me as well. Thank you.
Have a good flight back.
This is the Secular Nation Podcast, signing out.